Hi guys. Today we are going to review with you another horrible case. It's pretty exciting to admit to your parents the decision to plan your own wedding. Tina Thomas was a lot more nervous than her fiancé, Gabe Watson. Tina was 26 years old at the time, just like her future husband, and this was her third serious relationship and second attempt at a wedding. Her first attempt to build a family with boyfriend Scott McCulloch ended in failure. No, the relationship between the young people was just fine, but only Tina's mother was against this wedding and Scott himself. She did not like. There were no specific claims, but like every mother, she wanted a better and happier life for her daughter, and Tina herself at that moment was still very young. For this reason, the couple soon parted. The mirage of a joint future melted away. The second attempt with Stan Marks also failed. Here, Tina's parents did not play any role. The couple could not overcome the first 3-year crisis, and they parted by mutual consent. Finally, on Christmas Eve at a party of friends, Tina meets Gabe Watson. We can't say it was love at first sight. On the contrary, the relationship was built more as mutual support for each other after a recent breakup. Yes, perhaps this is not the most joyful reason to start building a new relationship, but 2 years later, Gabe proposed marriage to Tina. Tina, having learned from bitter experience, said she agreed but couldn't do it without parental blessing. In 2003, Gabe decided like a real prince, beautifully and romantically, appealed to the parents of his chosen one and chose Valentine's Day. But Tina's father was away, so the dinner was moved to the next day, on February 15th. During the dinner, when Watson voiced his decision to live with Tina all his life hand in hand, the father of the bride asked a seemingly simple question to the groom. Does he love Tina? Gabe stammered like a schoolboy, but never answered. His father considered this reaction to be a common embarrassment among strangers. Then he asked his daughter the same question. Surprisingly, Tina did not answer this question directly either, but began her speech by saying that she was afraid of being alone at the age of 26. The father thought for a while and blessed the young ones. Preparing for a wedding takes a lot of time and effort, and while Tina was thinking about her outfit, her guests, and the whole wedding, Gabe was only planning the honeymoon. He didn't care at all how his future wife wanted to spend her vacation. He had already decided everything for her. His plan was to go to the Great Barrier Reef, which is located in the Pacific Ocean near Australia, and go diving there, first of all, to look at the sunken ship, the Townsville Titanic, which sank back in 1911. The problem was that Tina, unlike Gabe, wasn't into diving. Yes, he took her scuba diving in the pool sometimes, in calm water, under the supervision of lifeguards, but no more than that. Gabe himself was an experienced scuba diver. He was completing a rescue diving course and had over 50 dives to his credit at the time. And of course, it wasn't in a pool. If you don't learn to dive by our honeymoon, I'm warning you right away. You're staying home, walking the dog, or pruning roses in the garden. You're not going anywhere with me, said Gabe. Tina had no choice. In fact, Gabe even took out a loan to buy her own equipment and pay for her fiancé's classes. The first instructor Tina had taken lessons with was disappointed in her skills and even warned Gabe that his fiancé had absolutely no skills for open ocean swimming. A furious Gabe wouldn't listen to the diving instructor, accusing him of being the one who couldn't explain and refused to continue the class. The second instructor rather quickly gave Tina a credit, although then noted that Tina does everything from under the stick solely to please her future husband. On October 11th, the young couple finally got married, and after 2 days, Tina and Gabe flew to Australia, spending on a trip of $10,000, which gave them for the wedding. It should be noted that Gabe devoted part of the honeymoon to Tina. They walked around Sydney, visited the Sydney Aquarium and the zoo. Tina was excited, but the closer they got to going to the Great Barrier Reef, the sadder she became. On the morning of October 21st, they flew to Townsville, and in the evening, boarded a boat to one of the most beautiful places on Earth and every diver's dream. After a while, employees of the diving company will tell that, in fact, the couple did not look like experienced divers. Even Gabe, who had graduated from courses and had experience behind him, could hardly understand the equipment, as if he saw it for the first time in his life. But nevertheless, it was he who helped Tina to pass the exam before diving, although such a test should be conducted separately. And when the instructor offered Tina his help underwater, she refused. It was also noted in the dive log that there was a strong current that day, and this moment in history should not be missed or glossed over. Gabe, as I said, helped his wife sort out the equipment they had bought back in the US and went to get the tanks they had to rent. Gabe took an 11L tank for himself and gave his wife an 8 and 1/2L tank, which for this place was an extremely small volume or even dangerous given Tina's experience, or rather lack thereof. It was not possible to descend to the Townsville Titanic from the first time. Tina asked for additional cargo because she could not dive to depth, and Gabe, at first, did not work underwater computer, which calculates the necessary speed of diving and ascent, as well as shows the amount of oxygen in the cylinders. After returning to the boat, the computer worked, and they tried again. The wreck was 49 FT deep, and Tina was the first to submerge, Gabe swimming behind her. From Gabe's statement, at first everything was fine. At some point, Tina stopped, started waving at me, and later signaled that she wanted to go up. I realized right away that she was just panicking. She used to do that. By this time, we were halfway up, so I decided to calm her down and stay with her at the same depth for a while without further diving, so that she could psychologically get used to the pressure. She continued to breathe very deeply, which was unsafe, and that's when I noticed she was sinking. I tried to grab her belt to hold her down, but she swung her arm so hard that she knocked the mask off my face. While I was putting the mask back on my face, though it didn't take long, Tina was already too far away from me. For a while, I tried to swim to her, but I was unsuccessful. Then I decided to return to the surface to ask for help from the lifeguards. On the way, I met another swimmer with a narrow-set eye, but he paid no attention to my signs for help. Yes, there were 2 Asian men with them at depth, but neither of them confirmed Gabe's words about his request for help. Later, when the police took underwater computer readings, they confirmed that Gabe did try to swim after his drowning wife for a while, but eventually gave up the attempt very quickly. Although the ascent to the surface itself was not an emergency, on the contrary, Gabe surfaced as instructed, stopping at each acquired depth level. As for the other divers, each of them, when questioned by police, claimed that Gabe could have saved his wife, but he simply did not. In addition, this tragic incident occurred at the very beginning of their dive, and therefore Gabe had enough oxygen in his tanks to swim to the bottom and return back to the surface. The rescuers on duty on the ship, as soon as they realized what had happened, immediately went in search of Tina and found her very quickly. But unfortunately, it was too late. Tina was lying on her back with her eyes open under her mask at a depth of 82 wafor. Her body was immediately lifted up, and on the deck of the yacht, they gave her artificial respiration for about 40 minutes, but to no avail. Tina died. Gabe all this time did not come close to his wife, but only stood somewhere aside, and according to witnesses, naively sniffed his nose. The same employees of the company said that the young man on the way to the shore smiled at and even played cards with other passengers. Gabe denied this in court. The subsequent autopsy of Tina showed that not everything was so clear. Yes, there are no signs of obvious violent death, but there are bruises on the neck. There are traces of blood in the nostrils, which is also common at the 82 FT depth, where Tina's body was found. There are no traces of alcohol in the blood, but there are high levels of drugs such as ibuprofen and paracetamol, although these drugs are used in the treatment of seasickness. A small amount of fluid was seen in the lungs. The report stated that Tina died from drowning, but it is possible that she drowned while already deprived of oxygen. Tina's gear was checked by the Australian Water Police, but no malfunctions were noted. The police could have written it off as an accident. An inexperienced diver ignored safety rules and paid for it with his life. A very common case, unfortunately, but only there were suspicious moments in this story, such as rather ambiguous results of the autopsy. Also, according to the diving team, strange behavior of Watson, which does not fit into the conventional picture where the husband grieves for his wife who just died. All these factors did not give so easily close the case, and that's why the investigation was taking quite a long time. Gabe realized the detectives were digging for him. In addition, Tina's parents did not want to accept what had happened as a tragic accident and wanted to see their son-in-law in the dock, if not as the murderer of their daughter, then at least as a man who had not helped her. During the first interrogation, the police noted that the suspect was in shock, crying and laughing, twitching nervously, asking to call his father, who complained of pain in his ears, and begging him to tell his wife's parents about the tragedy. Late at night, Gabe was released. He went to the yacht that belonged to the company that sent them to the reef and asked them for a night's lodging, arguing that the trip was supposed to last 2 days, but because his wife had died, they had only been there for 24 hours. He also asked for a refund of half of the cost of their dive. In fact, he never got to see the sunken ship. On October 24th, Gabe's mother flies to Townsville to support her son and help him find a lawyer. That same day, at Gabe's request, they go to the morgue. Gabe wanted to see his wife one more time. Because the husband was still considered a suspect, the morgue employee called the detective who was in charge of the case. In theory, Gabe could have hidden some evidence, but the grief-stricken husband only cried, held his wife's cold hand, and begged her forgiveness, not realizing at all that the police officer was standing outside the door at the time, recording him on a tape recorder. "I didn't mean to hurt you." These are the words Detective Lawrence later uses against Gabe in court. "Then at the morgue, you told Tina you didn't mean to hurt her. What did you mean by that?" Lawrence will ask his question. The story of Gabe's sore ear was repeated again as he was traveling home with his wife's body. During a layover in Oakland, he sought medical attention on the airport grounds and was held there for evaluation. According to the investigation, this was done on purpose to avoid seeing Tina's father, however, and divers will confirm this. Ear problems are a fairly common ailment among divers. Tina's funeral was held on November 5th, where Gabe still had to meet with the deceased's father. Gabe, almost in full view of everyone, took off his wife's wedding ring, putting it on his ring finger over hers, as well as earrings, which he immediately handed over to his father-in-law. Watson and the Thomas family never crossed paths again that day. Later in the trial, Gabe would be asked the question, "Did you really take your wife's jewelry off during the funeral?" Gabe will only smile and shrug. "I don't think I could have done it." Later, everyone had different opinions about Gabe. Some said that this chubby, funny man was quite a kind man, and some, on the contrary, called him a tyrant and a desperate. But they all agreed on one thing. Gabe and Tina were not happy, or at least they didn't seem to be. Tina's friends confirmed what she'd told her father at a family dinner on February 15th. Her union with Gabe was just a way to avoid dying alone, and that fear had led Tina to die on the seabed. Also, the victim, who died shortly before their honeymoon, confessed to a friend that her husband dragged her by the hand to an insurance company where he forced her to insure his life at a higher interest rate in case of death and put his name in the column beneficiary. This testimony was checked through the insurance agent, and he confirmed everything. The cab driver who drove the newlyweds to the yacht was also questioned. Tina cried the whole way, but her husband paid no attention to her. Finally, Tina's friend, Amanda Phillips, told another story, and it became clear what the couple's relationship was really like. "This damn jerk videotaped Tina urinating in the bathroom and then edited it and put it in a tape of them celebrating Christmas. That would have been okay, but he turned it on at a general viewing with a full house of guests. He laughed like a horse while everyone twiddled their fingers around their temples and tried to explain to him that it was a very low act. I was clutching crosses on my fingers so Tina wouldn't get the idea to marry him." While removing jewelry right during a funeral may seem like a frightening and denunciatory act on Gabe's part, during the trial in 2008, the jury was shown an extremely disturbing footage of Watson visiting Tina's grave, taking all the flowers from it, and carrying them away. They were later found in a nearby trash can. Tina's father noticed the missing flowers and to find out the thief, he set up a hidden camera in the next row among the monuments. But he never expected to see Gabe on the tape and was outraged by such an act. In court, Gabe's defense was that he and his wife had discussed the death of one of their own on an extreme honeymoon, and the lack of flowers on the grave was her request, which sounded very strange and unlikely. There's no telling how long the search for evidence would have dragged on if the cops had put on the exact same gear the newlyweds had and hadn't tried to stage that incident. Gabe said Tina drowned while he was trying to put a mask on her face. It turned out it was impossible to put the mask on underwater by yourself unless you used another source of air, in this case, Tina's oxygen. In late November 2008, the Australian police arrested Gabe, and on June 5, 2009, Gabe's trial began, where he pleaded guilty, but only to failing to save his wife. So he was charged with negligent homicide and sent to prison for 18 months. After completing his sentence, Gabe returned home to the U.S. But a year later, the now U.S. court charged him with first-degree murder, the motive for which was to receive insurance payments after the death of his wife. Gabe's lawyer tried to defend his client, shifting all the blame on the diving company, claiming that the employees of this company did not take care of the safety of tourists and are now trying to shift the blame on the unhappy husband who has already served his time in another country. As for the money received from the insurance company, the payout amounted to $33,000, while Gabe spent much more money on lawyers and additional expertise. Nevertheless, the prosecution continued to insist that this spending was only because the husband could not assume that he would not be believed. The prosecutor also refused to accept the fact that Gabe, with a degree in drowning rescue in hand, could not even save his wife. When Gabe had his say, he addressed the jury. "It's been 7 years since the tragedy, and there hasn't been a day that I haven't thought about that terrible day. The public has pounced on me, blaming me for my wife's death, calling me a murderer. There wasn't a single person who looked me in the eye and said, 'Yes, I understand how bad you feel, but it's not your fault.' On the contrary, everyone just wants me dead. And here, I can only understand my late wife's parents. Yes, they will never forgive me, no matter how much I kneel before them, and no matter how much I beg their forgiveness. You often hear the phrase, 'I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child.' But I've never heard anyone say, 'I can't imagine what it's like to lose a wife, especially on a honeymoon.' If I can be accused of anything, it's that I didn't make enough effort to save Tina. But I've already received my punishment for that. Perhaps you all would have been satisfied if I had drowned with my wife 7 years ago. But I was afraid to die, afraid I wouldn't be able to rise from the bottom to the top. I just wanted to live, as I still want to live now." No evidence of Gabe's guilt was presented to the court. The jury found Gabe not guilty. What do you guys think? Is Gabe guilty of Tina's death? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. There are many shocking stories ahead.